So excuse the poor light quality, but you can see it's dark outside, and that is because it's about 3:30 in the morning and I'm just in the final run-in on the Melbourne Cup. I will get up in the middle of the night to trade a horse race, but especially something like the Melbourne Cup. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the opportunities in a second outside of Australia as well. But one of the things I wanted to share with you was how I came into Australian racing, because I was always aware of the Melbourne Cup, and the very, very first Melbourne Cup that I attempted to trade was way back in, I think, 2005 or 2006. I'd have to check on that, but I will put an image up on the screen for you so you can see what the market is. But my full introduction to Australian racing involved my ability to seemingly be very accident prone. And as I record this video, I have my finger in a splint because I damaged both my ribs and my finger in an accident on my mountain bike recently. But the reason for sharing this with you is this describes my attitudes to many different things. And it's something that I've picked up over the years. I used to be sort of relatively cautious and sort of, I'm looking for the right word here. I always stayed well within my comfort zone when I was young. But as I grew older, and especially when I started trading, what I tried to do all of the time was to find that boundary, find that edge, figure out, how far can you push something without pushing it too far. And that's why I get injured so often, because I do that in every part of my life, and especially on the mountain bike. When I'm careering down a hill at sort of 30, 35 miles an hour, you're always sort of right on the edge of what you can do. And that's why I enjoy it. But every now and again, unfortunately, it does go wrong. And it's the same within trading. I'm always trying to find that boundary, find my limit of what I can do competently. Apart from when you're trading, if you go over the edge there, it just ends up as a monetary loss. But the thing is, if you trade conservatively and you don't look for opportunities, then you'll never find them, because trading is all about taking risk, not avoiding it. And my introduction to Australian racing and my reason for doing Australian racing sort of encapsulates all of that, because the funny thing is that I would trade the Melbourne Cup and I would pay a bit of attention to other stuff that was going on. But my true introduction to Australian racing was when I actually had an accident. And basically my back hurt so much I was unable to sleep. So I got up in the middle of the night. It happened to be a Saturday. And I just sat down at my desk and just thought, well, let's do some paperwork or stuff like that. But inevitably I sort of gravitated to the markets. And I looked down the screen and I suddenly saw these races were turning over decent amounts of money. And I'm thinking, well, I'm recognizing these markets. They look very similar to what I'm used to trading in the UK. So let's give it a go. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've been trading the Australian markets ever since. And it's become sort of just part and parcel of something that I do on an annual basis. But there are also other foreign race meetings that I trade as well that have sort of come into the mix over time. And, there's a defining characteristic that you need to be aware of as to whether you should participate or not in these markets, which is what I'll discuss next. So it is true, I will get up in the middle of the night to trade a horse race. And the reason for doing that is whenever you get a big race meeting somewhere, that usually produces a big betting market, and a big betting market creates a great trading opportunity. So it was inevitable over time that what I'd learnt on UK horse racing, I would start to transplant elsewhere. And that's exactly what I've done. So the sort of tactics and knowledge that I have in UK racing applies equally to French racing, to racing in the United States, and also into Australia. And of course, the biggest race of the year in Australia is the Melbourne Cup.
Well, there's been a lot of money matched on the exchanges over here in the UK, where, what are we now on the win market? We're 1.7 million quid. So there's plenty of people staying up in the wee small hours of the morning to invest, and we'll be bringing you the race live and all the build-up after this.
So the interesting thing about a lot of these big race meetings is that they occur towards the end of the year. Not all of them, but, if you look at that October-November period within the year, then you get a sequence of high-profile meetings across different countries. The first one is the Prix de Triomphe in Longchamp in France. And that particular day, with the Prix de l'Arc in it, has always been a good trading day for me. It's usually possible for me to get money out of it. The only downside is that is on a Sunday, and I generally don't trade Sundays. You need a day off to do other things. You need to have a cut-off point somewhere, but I will trade on a Sunday when it's the Prix de Triomphe. As we move into the late October and early November, what you tend to find is that you get a build-up of group racing in Australia, and that's all sort of pointing towards the Melbourne Cup. But the interesting thing is, on that first day, on Victoria Derby Day of the Melbourne Cup meeting, we also have the Breeders' Cup in the US. And the Breeders' Cup is pretty much the only US racing that I'll trade. When you get the Breeders' Cup, it's on a Friday and a Saturday. The Friday is a bit sort of, and that will be late UK time. But the Saturday is usually pretty good. And again, if it's on the west coast of the US, and typically in places like Del Mar or Santa Anita, then you get, that will take place sort of very late at night. So you have to be a bit of a night owl to be able to trade that. And of course, if you combine that with the Melbourne Cup, then what you actually realize is that you'll probably be up in the morning for the Melbourne Cup meeting on that Saturday, and then you'll trade the UK racing, and then you'll immediately move on to the Breeders' Cup. So it's a bit of a marathon if you really want to go for it on this particular day. However, it is worth it. You get like a triple, I was going to say double bubble, but it's a triple bubble because you can get to trade the UK, the Breeders' Cup, and the Australian racing. So yeah, you know, that is a really good sort of end and start to that October-November period. And it's one of my favorite weeks of the year because it's a week where I know that there's going to be lots of quality around, and I can really throw a lot of effort at those markets because they're going to have good liquidity and good volume. So yeah, over the course of the year, you know, you tend to get a number of different meetings, but there's quite a nice little cluster in October, November. The other meeting of note that I do trade regularly would be the Dubai World Cup, but in recent years that hasn't performed quite as well, and that's in March as well. Maybe that explains part of the reason. I don't know why that has declined in significance, and maybe somebody can offer me some comment on why they think that perhaps is occurring. But yeah, all of those meetings are certainly worth your attention, and especially around that October, November time of the year. So if we focus on this October, November sort of time, one of the interesting things that you'll notice here is how these markets trade in comparison to the UK. Because in the UK, what you're looking at is a fairly regular schedule of meetings stopping and starting and nice little gaps between them, and money flows from one to the other and stuff like that. But when you trade a meeting, so the first one would be at the beginning of October, the Prix de Triomphe, what you tend to find is all of the focus is on that particular meeting. And as a consequence, the money sort of comes in. You know, you do get that big spike at the end of volume as everybody starts to put their final bets down. But the volume is sort of steady and progressive over the course of that particular timing between the previous race and the next race. And you sort of see that behavior within the Breeders' Cup as well. If you trade the Breeders' Cup, or you have a look at those markets, especially around the big races, then you will see a similar pattern of activity. The money isn't as violent as you typically get in the UK, but necessarily you always do get that little spike towards the end. But what I'm trying to say here is that the volume is more consistent over a period of time. So whenever you actively trade these markets, you have to take that into account. It's not the same sort of velocity that you would get in the UK, but also the level of staking that you have to use is probably a little bit lower, but you may trade the market for a bit longer. That's typically how those types of markets trade. When we look at something like the Melbourne Cup as well, the Melbourne Cup is so big that sort of behaves a bit like a Grand National market in that the volume is consistent throughout the whole day. And again, you get that little uptick of activity towards the end of the race, but the money comes in fairly consistently over a long period of time. However, when we look at the normal Australian racing and those in-betweeny sort of races that are either on the Flemington card or elsewhere within Australia, they tend to behave a bit more like you would typically see within the UK. The money transfers from one market to the next, and then you get that big burst of volume towards the end. So if you're looking at how the markets are likely to trade, the Australian markets trade in a similar manner to the UK, but perhaps not so much the Prix de Triomphe or the Breeders' Cup. But whichever one of those you're looking at, have a play with them, get familiar with them, and I'm sure that you'll sort of understand the subtle differences between what you see in the UK and those over time. And if it's the first time that you've traded, don't expect to be able to do as well as you do necessarily in the UK. It may take a little bit of practice to be able to get used to the way that these markets feel. And what I tend to do is I tend to make notes every year on what happened in the markets and my feelings on them, so that when I go to do them next year for the first time in 12 months, I know exactly what to expect. And I suggest that that's something, if you're trading these for the first time, that you should do as well. So as I hinted earlier, primarily what you're looking for are big betting markets. Those make for good trading markets. And when you're looking at a trading market, you need, or the perfect trading market for me would be something that has volume and liquidity. So if you get volume and liquidity, those are the two key characteristics that draw my attention to a market. And it's worth exploring both of these to understand why you would target certain types of races or certain types of markets. Because when you talk about volume, that's pretty self-explanatory. If a market does £500, that's not going to be as good as a market that does £500,000 or maybe £5 million. And the amount of volume that goes through the market is generally a proxy for how interested in people are in that particular market. So the higher the volume you get in the market, the better the market is to trade. Now, when we talk about liquidity, volume is not liquidity. Liquidity is not volume, because liquidity is the amount of money that is getting matched per second. So it's quite possible that you could have a market turning over 10 million, but if that's over the course of 6 months and it's doing, £2 a second, that's not very interesting. And the reason that liquidity is important, because it significantly influences your ability to be able to trade it effectively. If you put an order in the market for £500, but it's only getting chipped away at, tenors and fivers here, or maybe the odd 50 quid, then the problem that you get is that it's very difficult to get out of that position if you've got it wrong. However, if there's a lot of liquidity going through the market and stuff is getting matched at many thousands of pounds a second, then you can put an order in the market and you sort of think, no, I've changed my mind, I'm going to get rid of that order. Or you can exit the market quickly, maybe for a small loss. You don't have to wait for that order to get filled, and therefore the position could start to run against you. So the amount of money that's getting matched per second, the liquidity, makes for a very interesting market. And if you get the volume and the liquidity at the same time, then that makes for a superb market, which is why I find all of these high profile meetings that are stated around the globe as very, very interesting, and why I will get up in the middle of the night to trade them. So all of these overseas race meetings are something that supplement my trading on a regular basis. I gradually moved into them. I didn't do them and then try and work out how to do UK racing. I worked out how to do UK racing and then transplanted those skills and abilities to do all of these other race meetings as well. They're subtly different, but there are opportunities there if you want them. But that may involve having to get up early in the UK or work late in terms of the Breeders' Cup. Or if you really want to go for it, getting up in the middle of the night for the Melbourne Cup. But it is worth it. There are opportunities there. So when you turn up for these markets for the very first time, you may not quite get it. When I traded the Melbourne Cup, it took me like 2 or 3 years of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to actually completely work out exactly what I was supposed to be doing and why, and the subtle differences between the two. So it may take you a little bit of effort to do that. But there are plenty of opportunities around at this time of year for you to dabble into those markets and expand your ability in terms of your trading ability and the number of opportunities that you can find. And always remember that negative people find problems, positive people, opportunities.